On the show today, we have guest Dr. Jana Lee. As founder and CEO of Jana Lee Consulting and Associates, Dr. Jana Lee brings over 18 years of experience in K-12 education. She began her career as a founding special education teacher in a high-needs South Bronx school, where she built and led the special education department, developed curriculum, and served as a peer instructional coach. Driven by a passion for closing achievement gaps and building sustainable systems, Dr. Lee founded Jana Lee Consulting, a national firm partnering with schools and districts to improve academic performance and school culture. She holds a PhD in leadership with a specialization in reading, language, and literacy, and a master's degrees in special education and educational leadership. Get ready for a great episode.
I'm educational justice coach Lindsay Lyons, and here on the Time for Teachership podcast, we learn how to inspire educational innovation for racial and gender justice, design curricula grounded in student voice, and build capacity for shared leadership. I'm a former teacher leader turned instructional coach. I'm striving to live a life full of learning, running, baking, traveling, and parenting because we can be rockstar educators and be full human beings. If you're a principal, assistant superintendent, curriculum director, instructional coach, or teacher who enjoys nerding out about co-created curriculum with students, I made this show for you. Here we go. Dr. Jana Lee, welcome to the Time for Teachership podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and be able to chat with you.
I am so excited too. And so I've been starting episodes recently with what's on our mind as we jump into the conversation. So I'll share that on my mind are two things. So one, you had an amazing episode on Chrissy Beltran's podcast, which I loved, about how to measure coaching effectiveness. And then I also have been thinking myself about outcomes-based contracting, which for schools and districts listening or engaging with the episode, it's like paying coaching coaches, contractors for the actual impacts on student learning as part of the deal with the contract. So that lends itself to a lot of measurement questions, like how do we actually measure student learning effectively? And so I'm really excited to dig into this concept of measuring today. What's
Absolutely.
on your mind?
And what's on my mind, the excitement in being able to share how we can actually collect some concrete data that speaks to the impact that our work is having, not just on teachers, but also on students, just like you shared. I think that it's a very nuanced concept, but one that is really important to dig further into because it just showcases the work that we are doing and its effectiveness.
Thank you for that. One of the things I want to just ask big picture before we get into the specifics is I love Dr. Bettina Love's quote about freedom dreaming. And so she says there are dreams grounded in the critique of injustice. And so with that in mind, what is that big dream that you hold for education?
Wow, what a what a very big question. I think my big dream is that teachers, because I'm always thinking about what's happening boots on the ground alongside students, and teachers are the ones that are the most, just have the most interaction naturally, being that they're in the classroom, but that all students of all learning capabilities leave their K-12 experience feeling more confident and ready for their post-secondary lives. And that can look a number of different ways. And that it's not just a student's academic capabilities that we're looking at, but also how we're rebuilding them socially and emotionally and mentally, where they're leaving being ready to do what's next for them that best fits, their wants, their needs, their interests. And I think that is something that can be achieved when we approach education through as inclusive a lens as possible. And we make decisions on a regular daily basis that are inclusive for all students.
Great. I think as we think about that, one of the things that may come up for people as they're thinking about, for example, pedagogies, but also the measurement aspect of how do I know I'm doing well? How do I assess students, right? From all the lenses. I think about maybe how we learn things in teacher school versus what is real and good and equitable and inclusive for students. And so are there any mindset shifts that you've noticed you've had to coach on or have seen kind of the aha moment come to a teacher or even yourself as you're kind of switching to like, this is actually different from what I thought I would be doing or should be doing, but this is the way?
Sure. I mean, a lot of my work recently, and my background is in special education. I was worked as a special education teacher in the South Bronx of New York for almost 10 years. And so I had students of all, shapes and sizes and all sort of different circumstances and home backgrounds. And, I had to learn how to put my own beliefs of what I thought they were capable of, including students with IEPs, students who had, challenges in their behavior or just, had great foundational gaps. I had to put that to the side to a degree and move more toward groupings and shifts in my instruction that were reflective of what they were doing in the moment, and learning how to collect that information to make flexible decisions and not allowing my preconceived beliefs about them drive the decisions that I was making. And so a lot of my work today, and this might be, a bit controversial, and I'm not saying that we should get rid of leveled groupings of any sort, but I am saying that a lot of my work recently has been around how do we shift from grouping students and providing them with scaffolds or instruction based on their levels or what, grade level we think they're at, functionally speaking, and more so make decisions in the moment and use data in the moment that allows us to make grouping decisions. And I think, a lot of the pushback at times that I get from that is, well, I would have the same students in the group anyways. That's not necessarily true. I think when we build a culture when we build a culture that moves away from, well, you typically struggle, so let me work with you, and move more toward, I'm going to look for X, Y, and Z and then work for you. If you're producing something that doesn't align with that, then we build a culture of safety and risk taking where students are actually destigmatized because it's not based on whether they have an IEP or whether, their benchmark results, showed certain gaps. And I'm not saying that we don't use those benchmark results, but I am saying that oftentimes I find that decisions are made, school-wide and in the classroom, more so based on the overarching benchmark results as opposed to what we see students are really creating and doing in the classroom. And so, that's been a really big shift in thought because traditionally speaking, when we're working with students, I think we work with them based on, and this might be difficult to admit, but based on what we believe and think that they are able to do. And so that comes to teachers and leaders being very, very explicitly thinking about, how do I move away from that and move more toward a skill-based grouping flexible approach.
I love so much of what you're saying. I'm taking notes here on like the levels idea, right? The skill levels versus, and even within that, I've been playing with, so I coach with a lot of teachers and have taught a lot of multilingual learners. And so sometimes we'll say like, oh, these are level 1s or these are level 2s, specifically speaking about a test that actually assesses a variety of things linguistically. And so it's like, this might be like, instead, can we move to more language? Like, this is a student who excels with verbal explanation, and their verbal expression is actually better in a small group versus a large group. Or like how nuanced can we be? I think there's like one piece, right? And then there's also this idea of like, in the moment, that's really hard for a teacher. So there's a lot of practice that's required, I think, and maybe some modeling of like, how do you do that kind of responsiveness that you're talking about, right? Like, I noticed these things. So first I have to know what I need to notice, and then I need to notice it. And then I need to actually be able to kind of move all the pieces and do all the groups and respond, which is so cool. And I'm sure involves a lot of work, right?
It does. And, but to go back to swing it back to what you mentioned earlier about looking at how our outcomes are impacting student achievement, We need a very systematic way of collecting that quantitative evidence, that evidence that speaks to numbers. And so if you as a teacher are on the ground looking at that, as I call it, the check for understanding, and using that as the moment to measure independent proficiency of a skill, that's a lot easier for you to collect and track than perhaps, constantly grouping students based on those levels where, there's a range of things that you need to address in the level grouping. And it's quite difficult for teachers to know, where do I begin, right? And I think along with that, you then, when you combine that benchmark work with what am I seeing students are struggling or proficient in with skills in the classroom, those two pieces of data, those data points should speak to each other. So ideally, we should know where our benchmarks are going to land prior to the benchmark even existing, because teachers are engaging with that information on a regular basis. And I think another big component of that is, how are we layering in the work that teachers are, or those data points that teachers are collecting in the classroom? How are we layering that into what they are doing in the other pieces of the school community? How are, leadership providing feedback as it relates to teachers making those flexible decisions? How are teachers engaging with student work in their, professional learning communities or grade team meetings? So it really, it moves beyond, ideally it moves beyond just teachers making those decisions in the classroom, and leadership being very strategic and allowing teachers to then engage with that information outside of the classroom and with each other to create streamlined instructional decisions. Before I forget, I think a really big component of this is that we see the greatest change when students are receiving consistency across classrooms, which is why the shift from, why part of my work and my belief is that we have to teach skills and use content to drive the teaching of those skills, and then use instructional activities to create engaging interaction with the content. And so when students are receiving skill-based instruction across the board, we're far more likely to see increase in student achievement, because it's not just happening in isolation. It's not just content driven. It's not like, oh, I'm going to go to social studies and learn just about social studies, and then when I go to math, I only, I'm just learning math. It's about, what does justify look like in social studies, and what does it mean to justify in math? And so when we can allow teachers to, on the ground, collect information on students as it relates to those skills, and then bring that information to their meetings, they can create consistent instructional, strategies, and they can collaborate around what's working and not working for specific students. That allows students just greater opportunity throughout their day to practice these skills and continue to thrive. And that's really, goes back to the idea of creating inclusive culture and allowing us to have greater opportunity to measure the impact that we're having on student achievement.
Hi, this is Leah popping in to share the free resource for this episode, Data Insight Survey and Video. Use the survey to assess your teacher's own understanding of data. It's a free, editable, and downloadable survey. You can find it at the blog post for this episode, www.lindsaybethlyons.com/blog/244. Now back to the show.
I just want to stamp that for people who missed that the first time. That's brilliant, and what a good mindset shift. Also, I'm thinking about kind of both the structures and then the data specifically together when we're thinking about instructional leaders. So instructional coaches, or maybe, in a small school setting, it might be like a building leader, like an assistant principal or someone.
Yeah.
So you were talking about professional learning communities. I imagine there's probably instructional coaching cycles that could happen. There's all of it places. And so are there either structures that you recommend, or moves leaders can make to enhance or set up these structures, as well as what data would you actually encourage folks to gather, or even gather yourself as an instructional leader, to then look at, analyze, respond to in that professional learning space?
Yeah. So it all starts with your goals, whether they're district goals, building goals, whatever the goals are, everybody needs to know about them, and everybody needs to know what is my role in bringing this goal to life. And I would make the assumption that somewhere in those goals include, how collectively we are increasing student achievement, right? And so from a leadership coaching perspective, it is really important that your role as a coach is defined in terms of when I am supporting teachers or when I am looking at the building of these meetings that I might have, or my faculty meetings, or the way in which I'm communicating weekly to my staff. How am I bringing in these goals, number one? And then number two, how am I making it clear about, as a leader, my role in supporting boots on the ground for teachers? So teachers, there's no secrets here. There's a lot of transparency, right? So that's the first thing. There's got to be real clarity around, as a coach, what am I doing to support these goals, right? And then how does that come to life instructionally so that I can support teachers very clearly? So what goes along with that in terms of a system? I'm a huge fan of taking the guesswork out of support. Co-create a list of look-fors or success criteria that speaks to the pedagogy that you are looking for in the classroom. So often support comes through, oh, let me give you, just for a lack of a better word, like rose or a thorn, or a grow, or, grow or glow. That feedback is kind of, can go all over the place. Whereas we see the greatest gains when the feedback is very centered on an instructional move or something specific as it relates to the look-fors that you've created. And those look-fors should align directly to the goals of the district, that, or the school community. That is a very, that's a structural component that will take a lot of the guesswork also out of, are we meeting our goals? Because everybody has a role to play. And a lot of times, if I were to ask a teacher, what are your building goals or what are your district goals, to, no fault of their own, a lot of them struggle in being able to communicate that. And so everybody needs to be working toward what the, overarching student achievement goals are for the community. And everybody has a role to play. And then as teachers, it's important that teachers are very clear on, what are the moves that they need to be making in order to bring those goals to life, and in order to fulfill the look-fors and the success criteria that they have co-developed as it relates to, the bigger picture. And teachers are then very clear on what they are working toward, and they know that the support that comes from leadership or coaching is going to align directly toward that. So, you start small, and in your PLCs or in your leadership meetings, you're looking at the data that you are collecting with those look-fors and success criteria to say one of two things. Yeah, we're moving in the right direction in terms of where we want to go with achievement, right? Or to say, hey, we're really growing in these areas, but it looks like when it comes to, student engagement in small groups, I'm just, or the number of minutes that teachers are engaged in direct instruction. These are little pockets that we really want to hone in on. So it allows you to see themes and patterns to modify the support and to leverage and highlight the great gains that you're seeing. And, it also it takes the guesswork out. It kind of, well, two things, takes the guesswork for leadership out of what support am I providing? The language is there. There's consistency in messaging. Everybody knows what they're doing and what they're working toward. And for teachers, it kind of allows them to lessen bring their walls down a little bit, because it's less of a guessing game. Like, oh, what are they in here to see? Like, am I doing the right thing? Right? Am I doing what they want? Teachers are clear on the moves that they should be making. And all of it collectively allows us to collect information that is number driven. It allows for teachers to feel like their voices are being heard in terms of, what they want this to look like when look-fors and success criteria are co-created. And it allows support to be very driven and focused. And then your student achievement should back that great work up. So you're not just relying on student achievement numbers to tell you the success of, the pedagogy. You're allowing, both of those pieces of information to speak to the impact that you're having holistically.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm thinking about the student achievement, specifically that student achievement data. So you could go in, right, as instructional leader, or even as a teacher who's kind of observing different pieces and observe certain things. And then there's also, like, I know I've heard you talk about the student artifacts themselves, right, being really powerful. So beyond, I think a lot of times, traditionally, we think a lot of times of like a test or something, but like, how did that student do on that exit ticket, right? Or like, what was the quote shared in the verbal discussion, and we're assessing discourse. Are there particular either like lesser collected types of data, or like data that actually is really illuminating that one might not initially think to collect, that you would highlight?
Absolutely. I think in secondary, um, anything that I'm gonna go to secondary first, and then I'm gonna go to elementary, because I think elementary can be a little bit more difficult, particularly when it comes to reading and writing. I'll talk about that in a moment. In secondary, anything that shows a student's thought process in written form is going to allow teachers to assess not whether they got it right or wrong, but where the error in thought process occurred, right? That then I'm having a lot of conversations. My team and I are having a lot of conversations with teachers around when you're then remediating or targeting or intervening, it's not just about repeating what the student already heard in the previous lesson. You have to change the approach and identify where the gap was, so that you better understand what that remediation needs to look like. We actually have a small group playbook that maybe I can send to you the link, Lindsay, and you can throw it up somewhere, or people can access it. But that small group playbook, allowing teachers to say, this is where I saw the error, and then this is how I would respond. So you might have students that didn't get it correct because they just didn't follow the directions, right? That's going to look, how you target your feedback for that student is going to look a little different than the student who made a gap, or has processing challenges and got it wrong, because the way in which they're sequencing their thoughts are just mixed up, right? So we've got to be able to hone in on that a little bit with more certainty. And so looking at actual artifacts, anything that shows that thought process, is going to allow us to do that. Now, I moved to elementary, which is more difficult, because, you're getting into the nuances of students who are learning how to read, or reading to learn. You get into students who might not have that writing maturation quite yet, especially in your, I would even say, pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, where students are just learning how to craft or draw or label, right? This is where teachers have to be able to collect something that is either behavioral, right? Something that is oral, that oral language, something that demonstrates production, but it might not necessarily be in written form. So they might be bringing anecdotes that speak to what it is that they saw from students or heard, whether it's, something tactile, or, students are engaging in a turn and talk, right? So that information might be more anecdotal, but it should still be thick enough, I guess I would say, heavy enough, where teachers can dig in to see, where did the thought process, or where is where are we not hitting the mark? Why is the student not meeting that skill? Especially in reading, with phonics and whatnot being something that obviously a lot of, school communities are moving more toward. How are we, digging or annotating our curriculum to also show where students are maybe going left, or not where they are missing the mark? So you might see more of the annotation of curriculum or anecdotes be brought to the table, but nonetheless, the same rules apply in terms of being able to speak to student thought, and where the the error occurred.
So much there. One of the things I'm thinking about is like when we have to do responsive coaching or remediation, right? We have to have that diagnosis of where the error occurs. I think sometimes we just jump right over that. We don't think about, like, we just need to know that there's not an understanding. But then how do you possibly correct the understanding, right? If we're not sure where the error occurs. So I just love that you illuminated that for us. Like, we need to just understand students' thinking. And again, to your point, it could look very different how we assess that. I even had yesterday I was in a discourse session at Boston Public Schools, and the instructional coach there, or program lead there for social studies, was like, "Oh, what I used to do in my fourth grade class," and it was like mind blowing. She's like, "We used these little manipulatives, and like every time they spoke, it would be like you build on the same tower if you build on each other's ideas. You make a separate tower if you're new ideas, and like each person has a different color, so you can see where the pattern of conversation goes." And I'm like, I never would have thought of that. Elementary teachers are brilliant, but like, yeah, think about the creative ways that we can do that might not be in writing, but is still highly valuable. Like, that's such a good idea.
And that's where the collaboration of like bringing that work to a professional learning community or meeting is so important, because it allows for teachers to engage in those conversations and learn from one another and see what's working versus not with particular students, or even just with instruction in general. And so if you know that you have students that are constantly, making a mistake when it requires thinking that's more than like 1 or 2 minutes long, that's something that teachers can say, we're going to focus on how to support the student or group of students with that in our classes, right? Along our lessons. And this is the strategy that we're going to use. That's why I'm such I will scream this from the rooftops. We have to be able to provide teachers with strategies that are program, content, and grade agnostic, and let the content drive the rigor. So whether I'm in a math class or social studies or reading or writing, we want these strategies to be able to be something that can be seen across the board. And so that's the consistency that is so important for students to receive throughout their day, as opposed to just in isolation, as I mentioned earlier, in isolation with, 1 or 2 teachers.
Such a powerful point. Such a powerful point. I'm recognizing that we are close to the end of our time together. I'd love to ask just a few more questions. Maybe we can do a lightning round of some sort.
Yes, I gotcha.
Okay, so biggest challenge that teachers face in like the either looking at data or like measuring data or like any of the things we've talked about. Is there something that comes up as like, this is a huge challenge and here's how you could go about it?
Giving students 60 to 90 seconds to do something completely independent without their support is really difficult for teachers to do. The number one thing that I would say to support that with teachers, mark somewhere in your lesson the 60 to 90 seconds that you're just going to let students go. And for the student that asks to go to the bathroom, let them. For the student that wasn't here yesterday and doesn't know what to do, let them sit there. For the student that's bugging their neighbor, let them. Anybody who doesn't produce lets you know that they're the group that you need to pull at some point to address whatever it is that they didn't get right or that they didn't do. That's the most difficult, letting students sit there and work on their own for 60 to 90 seconds, even if they're struggling.
I'm going to use that as a parent, just like shoes on. Okay, we're taking 5 minutes. Got it. Like, I'm going to at least let you struggle for 90 seconds.
Yes.
Love it.
Yes. We have to see what they can do on their own before we start to dig in and support, because it's the only way that we can collect who needs what.
Love it. Okay. Biggest thing you would encourage listeners to do when they end the episode, something that's like easily startable or implementable right away.
Yeah. Where in your lesson are you going to give them 60 to 90 seconds to work on their own as it relates to the skill that you are teaching?
Great. This is for fun, so it could be related to work or not at all.
Okay.
What is something that you have been learning about lately?
So my dissertation was on adolescent reading comprehension. So we have students who are in secondary schools or secondary grade levels that do not know how to read. And so a lot of what I've been thinking about has been, how do I translate my findings with that and share with as many secondary teachers as possible strategies that they can use in their classrooms to support those learners who might be reading at a, elementary or reading grade levels behind.
That resonates deeply as a high school special education teacher who had students reading at the first grade level. So thank you for doing that important work. And then people who want to, like myself now, follow all of that work that you're doing, where can folks connect with you in the online space or
Yes. So you can find me at jana.c.lee on Instagram. You can head to my website, www.janaleeconsulting.com. I've got resources there that'll lead you to all of my other platforms. We've got some really exciting things that are I'm excited to be able to share that with the world. I'm so excited to have been able to be here with you today and engage in this really important and fun conversation. So thank you.
If you like this episode, I bet you'll be just as jazzed as I am about my coaching program for increasing student-led discussions in your school. Shane Safir and Jamila Dugan talk about a pedagogy of student voice in their book, Street Data. They say students should be talking for 75% of class time. Do students in your school talk for 75% of each class period? I would love for you to walk into any classroom in your community and see this in action. If you're smiling to yourself as you listen right now, grab 20 minutes on my calendar to brainstorm how I can help you make this big dream a reality. I'll help you build a comprehensive plan, from full-day trainings and discussion protocols like Circle and Socratic Seminar to follow-up classroom visits where I can plan, witness, and debrief discussion-based lessons with your teachers. Sign up for a nerdy, no-strings-attached brainstorm call at lindsayBethLyons.com/contact. Until next time, leaders, think big, act brave, and be your best self.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. We'll see you on the next episode.